Question number 2, Metiria Turei.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou i te whare. Ko taku pātai ki te pirimia a ka pātai katuia I runga I te mana o tana kōrero. I honestly wish I could have changed the flag. I te wā I pātaitia ai, he aha tana tino pōuri nui.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, but the member should note I also stated that my other regrets were that we were unable to establish the Kermadec Ocean Sanctuary and the Trans-Pacific Partnership had not been fully ratified. Of course, there are many other things that I would love to continue working on, but I'll be leaving those for the future leadership team.
He pātai tāpiri.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Does the Prime Minister regret leaving 85,000 New Zealand children living in severe hardship?
Mr Speaker,
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm very proud of the record that this government has established and maintained for the most vulnerable young New Zealanders, and that's included the installation of over 300,000 homes, the first government in 43 years to raise benefits, free doctors' visits for children under 13, far greater participation rates in early childhood education, and the likes. Mr Speaker, I think all governments have work to do for the most vulnerable in their society, but this government can hold its head up high that it's worked in the best interests of those young New Zealanders, and I think the work that will continue in the new Ministry for Vulnerable Children will be an extremely important part of this government's future agenda.
He pātai tāpiri.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
So when he said this morning that he would have liked to have done more to help the country's most vulnerable children, does he now regret voting against legislation that would feed every poor child in this country in school and a warrant of fitness for their homes to stop them from getting sick and hospitalised?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Far from that, I'm very proud of the work that the government has done in relation to both insulation of homes, rheumatic fever, where there's been tremendous progress made, Mr Speaker. We've also championed, I think, a very logical program of breakfast in schools where we've partnered with Sanitarium and Fonterra. From memory, over 7 million breakfasts have been delivered. So, Mr Speaker, I think the government has, again, a very strong record and a proud record in that regard.
He pātai tāpiri.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Why doesn't he regret leaving 41,000 New Zealanders homeless?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, what's certainly true is that as rent prices have increased, there have been a few more homeless New Zealanders, but what the government has done is respond to that, and part of that was reflected in Budget 2016 with additional money for emergency support, the most recent package announced by the Minister for $300 million worth of support for emergency housing. Again, Mr Speaker, I'm very proud of the record that the government's got in that regard.
He pātai tāpiri.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Does he regret not addressing the housing crisis in 2009 when he recognised the early signs of it that's left thousands of New Zealanders homeless and many more first home buyers now priced out of the Auckland market?
The Right Honourable
Mr.
Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
if I was to take the member back to 2009, for a start off, interest rates were much higher than they now are under this government's watch. There wasn't, from memory, KiwiSaver Home Start for first home buyers, which was introduced later on. The work that we did to ensure that there was 200 special housing areas, if not more, that was being undertaken. We received no support from the Green Party in terms of the desire to reform the RMA. But quite the opposite, Mr Speaker. In 2009, if the member goes back and checks her records, she'll find that property developers in Auckland were going broke. They were going out of business, and the demand for by first-home buyers, and indeed any buyers in the Auckland property market and around the country, were very limited because of the global financial crisis.
He pātai tāpiri.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Does he regret that climate pollution rose 19% under his prime ministership?
The Right Honourable Prime
Mr
Minister.
Speaker, I'm proud of the fact that the government has introduced over time tougher standards in a range of areas. I'm proud of the fact that we've increased the amount of renewable energy that New Zealand now uses. I'm proud of the work that we're starting to progress around electric vehicles and the likes. But, Mr Speaker, The reality when it comes to climate change is that this government has followed a steady and actually medium course when it comes to climate change, and that is quite in contrast to a lot of countries around the world. And I think that what we should be concerned about is potentially if the United States, under the President-elect Donald Trump, pull out from their commitments that they were made under President Obama for the Paris Accord. And I think that's far more worrying than anything that New Zealand's doing. We've been progressing both an emissions trading scheme and a sensible policy approach to climate change.
He pātaitia.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Does he think that he'll look back on this time and regret that he spent more time worrying about the Sky City Casino profits and selling off state assets than he did about the families and the children who needed him most as Prime Minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, no. I do believe when the Sky City Convention Centre is completed at zero cost to the New Zealand taxpayer and ratepayer, it'll be a very fine asset for New Zealand. Mr Speaker, over the course of the last 8 years as Prime Minister, an enormous amount of focus has gone into the welfare of all New Zealanders and to their rights, their interests and their prosperity. And I think New Zealand as a country can now rightfully say it is far more confident about its place in the world and more prosperous, and that's why our economic results are great. Mr Speaker, I will leave this Parliament when I eventually give my final speech with a slightly warmer view towards this place and my role in it than clearly the member will.